McDonald at Search Marketing Expo in Seattle, Washington, and we've caught up with Matt Cutts after Matt's had a little opening kind of keynote thing this morning.
It was just a bunch of Q&A. It was fun.
And the duplicate content session,
Yeah.
Which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah.
Talked with a couple people about it already. It seems to me like the search engine's almost got as much out of it or more than most of the people in the audience. It's like a big built-in focus group of advanced webmasters.
That's one thing they've been doing a little more is some summit sessions. So there's a penalty box summit tomorrow, and it's kind of nice because it's like, okay, what do people want? And it's a two-way thing, a lot more than, okay, let's drown you with some PowerPoint and then have some time for questions. There's a little bit of PowerPoint, but a lot of it was just, okay, what do you want the most? What are the features you really need?
Well, it was funny. Alan Dick pointed out that he said, the duplicate content presentations are actually duplicated between the search engines. So technically that would be duplicate content, right? So,
yeah, it was funny at the end. Vanessa went last, and so she was like, okay, you've seen most of it.
Right.
So she gave Buffy examples instead. Good Willow, bad Willow, good Xander, good Xander. So, yeah.
Which applied, and that was interesting. I thought that was good.
Yeah, it worked.
And now, in terms of duplicate content, and kind of speaks to that everybody seems to have the same problems. I mean, all the major engines have essentially the same issues with duplicated content. And it was kind of brought up in the Q&A that maybe there's some things that the engines could do to, make some universals, let people claim their content or say, hey, this is mine.
Yeah.
What do you think of the odds of us seeing some things like that?
I think it's an interesting and it's a deep issue. It's kind of a tough one, too. So, really good question about claiming your own content, but then, like we were talking about that a couple days ago, a bunch of Googlers, and you always have to worry about how it can be spammed. And so, what if someone innocent doesn't claim their content, and then a smart spammer comes along and claims everybody else's content?
Exactly. Then they're going to be spidering the unclaimed content.
And so when you've got your crawl frequency and you have to worry about people taking your content in between the time when we might have crawled your pages, that's a tricky thing. Now, the nice thing is with some stuff like blog search, we get a ping, we can crawl it, we can see it right then. Mm-hmm. So the time frame on blog search is so much faster that we can know a little bit more about ownership. So I think we're open to trying a lot of different things, but it is a difficult issue.
Well, and another thing would be syndication. Syndication is not always a bad thing. We use a lot of syndication at WebPro News.
Sure.
The blog partners, but we want people to know that's their stuff and things like that. So that's, it helps get your message out, so it's not necessarily a bad concept, and something like that would probably hinder.
Yeah, and we've one thing we've said, which is a pretty good rule of thumb, is if you do syndicate your content, try to make sure that people know you're the master source of it. You can do that with a link from the article or a link from a video, stuff like that, because at least that way, if you've got two copies of the same content, this one, the canonical one, the real one, the preferred one, is likely to have more links. And so we'll just automatically see, oh, not only has it been around longer, it's got more page rank, stuff like that. So it just makes the job a little bit easier. So there are some good rules of thumb you can do whenever you syndicate that help break those ties a little bit.
And the other thing I wanted to touch on with you, obviously, was the paid link thing. You had your bet in the first in your initial session about that being in the first 3 questions or something. And basically what I took out of your take on paid links is if you want to do it, go ahead. But how Google reacts to that, it's
all right.
up to Google.
Yeah, absolutely. Some people say, well, how dare Google tell me what to do? And we're not. Like, you're the webmaster, it's your site, you do whatever you want on your site, and that's your right. But it's our index, and so we're allowed to do what we think is best in our index. And so here we are, we're defining what we think are best practices. And if you want to do really well in Google, and I think most webmasters do, here's some ways you can do well. But people always have the right to take on more risk, but we want to telegraph there is risk involved with that. And so people should think about it very carefully before they decide to.
I think, one of the people that asked the question was talking about major businesses and larger firms actually posting that they're looking for experience with buying links. So maybe the message from Google is not as clear as it needs to be in terms of, we do not like this.
Well, and I think it's interesting because we'd said we don't like this as early as 2005, but we hadn't talked about it that much recently. So even though I knew it wasn't going to be like incredibly popular with SEOs like to have as many tools in their toolbox as possible, I said, look, it's time to revisit this topic and remind people about it. And so even though we knew there would be a lot of comments, it's important to reiterate, here's the stance, and we might be taking stronger action on it in the future. So it's sort of giving people a heads up, giving them a little bit of notice. They can still choose what they want to do, but they should also think about the possible consequences or the possible implications of what they choose to do.
Right, and you also talked about updating or revising maybe the guidelines. Maybe this is something that would be included in some sort of revision for Google guidelines.
I think it would be good to make a lot of that stuff. We talked during the Q&A about how the guidelines are a little minimal because we wanted to give people the idea of what to do and not what to do, and not have to spell out triangular links, hexagonal links, pentagonal links, stuff like that.
You got into some higher math thing and lost me.
We were saying, well, okay, how about 4-way links? No, that's against the Google lines. How about 5-way links? And at some point, you're sort of like, you want to give the idea, and then people can infer from that. But I think it would be good to have a few more details, and so we've looked at how can we provide a few more scenarios or take some of the stuff we've said on the blog and sort of incorporate that a little more deeply into the Webmaster Guidelines.
Are the guidelines something that you guys are actively thinking about right now? Is it something people should be really looking at in the next 6 months, or let's say? Or
it's possible. It's more like there's a lot of things that simmer in the back of our mind, and so for example, within the last few months, we revised our Webmaster help in general to say, no, not everything is completely 100% automatic and no humans ever touch stuff, because you need to leave room for things like social search. So it is an ongoing process. We talked about search results and how it's a good practice to not have like tons of search results which don't add a lot of value. So we do go back and, for example, we also added don't add spyware, Trojans, malware, that sort of stuff. So it is sort of a living document where we go back and every few months we sort of say, okay, what do we need to add? How can we make it better?
All right. Thanks for stopping by, man.
Yeah,
Appreciate your time.
Good to see you again.
This is Mike McDonald with Search Marketing Expo in Seattle, Washington.
WebProNews.com. Breaking e-business news.